Well, all right, it's an exciting day to be a Treya fan because today we're talking about invoice schedules. And invoice schedules are one of those features you didn't know you needed until you used it. And an invoice schedule lays out all of the invoices for a project before it ever starts. So I'm looking at a project right now that hasn't started yet, and I can see all 6 invoices that are supposed to go out, when they're supposed to be issued, their due date, and the amount that they're supposed to be for, and they show up as the scheduled status. And this is cool because when I'm looking at all of my invoices across all of my projects in the invoices screen, I can see the ones that are about to go out so that I'm notified early about when to send them. I can see the total amount of booked business I have, which is an incredibly valuable number for forecasting your business and planning. And as I'm sending these invoices out, and maybe they're a little bit different than what I expected to be sending, I can see the difference between what I sent and what I was expecting to track revenue leakage and try and catch up over the course of the project to make sure I get the most revenue out of my projects as I can. The other great thing about this is when I'm building these invoices schedules, I'm typically building them during the sales process. So I'm knowing upfront before I start the project when these invoices are going to go out. And when I'm looking at a statement of work for one of these deals, I can see my invoice schedule automatically included into my statement of work. And this is a very valuable thing to send to clients because it helps them manage their cash flow. And for much larger companies, most of their procurement teams are going to require that you include an invoice schedule in your statement of work. So rather than having to enter all that information yourself and calculate all the numbers, we'll just have Treya do it for us. So let's see how this works. So I'm going to go jump into my pipeline. And then I'm going to click on one of the deals that I have already configured, and then I'm going to click on Billing and Invoicing. So right now we're looking at the proposed invoice schedule for this customer loyalty app that we've put together. This invoice schedule is based on the settings that we put into Configure Billing, which we're going to touch in a second here, as well as our project plan, which tells us the timelines and amount of resources that we're going to be using throughout the project, and that start date that we've configured. So clicking into Configure Billing, we have a lot of options that we can use to cater this schedule to what we and our client need. The first thing is whether or not this is a fixed fee or time and materials project. So fixed fee means whatever we told you it was, here's the invoice schedule, this is what the invoices are going to be for. They're not going to change. Versus time and materials, we're going to get to the end of a billing cycle, tally up all the hours that we've consumed, and then we're going to send our invoice to our client for the number of hours that we billed. So once we've figured that out, then we want to figure out, well, when are these invoices going to be sent? And we have a number of options for that. By default, we're going to send them monthly. That means that on the same day of each month is when we send that invoice for every month of that project. So right now we've set it to the 31st, and we can kind of see our invoice schedule here in the background where most of our invoices are going to land on the 31st of each month. Now, if a month doesn't have 31 days or that falls on a weekend, it's going to get moved to the most appropriate weekday that exists. And so let's see what happens if we change this. I'm going to change this to the 6th of the month, hit save, and our invoice schedule automatically reflows to meet that new schedule configuration. The other cool thing about this is if we start changing some of the parameters of our project, for example, right now we're looking at every invoice being $56,000. That breaks up the total price evenly. If I were to add markup to this of, let's say, we add an additional $30,000 to this project, that's automatically going to reflow through our invoice schedule. Same thing if we change the start date. We move it back to the 24th. Boom, we're going to get an updated invoice schedule based on the rules that we've set, depending on how our project planning evolves. And again, that statement of work is also going to have that updated invoice schedule as well. So let's go back and look at some of the other timing options that we have in Configure Billing. I could also send one every 4 weeks or every 2 weeks. So it's going to fall on the same day of the week at that cadence. So if I select bi-weekly, click on save, I get a lot more invoices. They're about half the size now. And that gives us the entire schedule for the entire project. Another option that we have is milestone-based billing. Because we've configured milestones in the timeline planner of this project plan for this particular deal, I can select on milestones. And when I choose milestone-based billing, I'm going to get an invoice scheduled for each milestone in the project. So I click on save, and we have 3 invoices to match the 3 milestones of our project. Now, the other option we have is in installments. This is really simplified billing where I can choose to send 1, 2, or 3 invoices at the beginning, middle, or end of the project. This is going to, like right now I've configured this to say the beginning of the project and the end of the project. We won't send one in the middle. I click on save, And I'm just gonna get 2 invoices, one when the project starts, one when the project ends, for half the amount of the total project price. Another thing that we can do is we can set up a down payment invoice. So going back into configure billing, I'm gonna change this back to monthly, and then I'm gonna select require a down payment. And from here I can pick a down payment based on a flat fee or a percentage. So I'm gonna say this is gonna be 5% of the total project, and then I gotta pick between advanced fee and security retainer. These are pretty simple. Security retainer is the typical one that you're going to use. That means that the down payment that they give you at the beginning of the project is held to the end of the project and taken off of that last invoice, versus an advanced fee is going to come off of that first couple of invoices. So I'll choose security retainer, I've switched to monthly, and we'll see that down payment invoice show up at the beginning of the project, and that amount is being taken out of that last invoice. Before we get into our next option, let's talk a little bit more about how these dates are determined. Now, by default, and what's going to happen most of the time, is that you are billing at the end of a billing cycle. So I'm doing it monthly, I work for a month, and then I send an invoice at the end of that month to collect on the work that I've done. And so the last invoice in a project is aligned with the end date of that project. So right now, based on our start date and the project plan that we have, we're slated to end this project on January 22nd, which means that our last invoice is sent on that last day of the project, January 22nd. And then working backwards, we apply our rules that we have in configure billing to get the rest of our invoice schedule. So we're doing monthly right now. The month before that, 31st. The month before that, the 30th, because the 31st doesn't exist, and so on until we get to the very beginning of the project where we're sending a down payment. And for time and materials deals, it has to be that way because we have to go through the month to know how many hours we billed in order to construct that invoice. But if we're doing fixed fee, we could also choose to bill at the beginning of a billing cycle, so a retainer-based billing method. For that, we click on configure billing. We're already on fixed fee, which is great. I'm gonna just turn off require down payment so we can see it a little bit better. And then I'm gonna switch on before a billing cycle begins. When we do this, the invoice schedule starts at the beginning of the project. So August 24th is what we have slated here, and then it follows those rules to get as many invoices as we need in to capture all of the work in the project. Now there's one more option I want to cover, which is you'll notice that when we're billing fixed fee like this, every invoice is going to be for the same amount. If I'm billing time and materials, that's going to be a little bit different. If I click on save here, I'm going to get very different amounts for each invoice, and that's because based on the project plan, different people are working at different times. There is a lot of work that's being done on this invoice here and much less work towards the end of this project. And because we are billing time and materials, those invoices are going to fluctuate based on the amount of work that we're doing. Now, there is a certain time where we'd want to use some different amounts per invoice when doing fixed fee if we're billing on milestones. For that, we have an option. So if I'm billing fixed fee and I am billing on milestones, I get this additional question where I can either distribute the entire price of the project equally across all invoices, or I can distribute it based on the size of each one of those milestones. And so when I click on that option based on the amount of work in each billing period and click save, I'm gonna get an invoice for each milestone, but it's gonna be sized relative to the amount of work that is being done in that milestone. And one more thing that I want to point out. When a deal becomes a project and this invoice schedule automatically gets transitioned over into that project, which we'll go find one right now, we're going to have all of our invoice schedules set up. However, that doesn't restrict us. We could still draft or schedule any invoice that we want to once that project has started. So if I hit schedule invoice, I can add a new invoice that I plan to send on the 24th for $10,000. Or if I wanted to, I could draft another invoice out of schedule, brand new invoice that exists outside of that schedule. We're not restricted in that way. It's just a good way for us to get an understanding of how our invoicing should work. But things come up. We might want to invoice for an expense, or we might add some additional time to the project for which we send an additional invoice. And all of that is totally acceptable to do. And all the stuff that we see here on the screen about managing a specific invoice, the line items, the pricing, the adjustments that go into that, we're going to cover in another video. Today we just wanted to focus on scheduling invoices, which are an incredibly important way for us to forecast our business and stay on top of cash flow.